The first gunshot missed Wade Hawkins by inches, splintering the wooden beam beside his head as he dove behind the water trough. His daughter Emma clutched tightly against his chest. This wasn't the first time the 32-year-old rancher had faced danger on his modest spread outside Silver Creek, Colorado. But it was the first time it had happened with his 6-year-old daughter watching, her eyes wide with terror. "Stay down, sweetheart," Wade whispered, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. He pulled his revolver from its holster, counting the seconds between shots, waiting for his opportunity. It was 1885, and the Colorado Territory had been a state for less than a decade. Life on the frontier remained harsh and unforgiving, especially for a widower trying to raise a daughter alone while keeping a small ranch afloat. The second shot came, then a third. Wade recognized the pattern of a Winchester repeater. Whoever was shooting at him wasn't just some random drifter. This was someone who knew how to handle a rifle. "I know you're there, Hawkins," a gravelly voice called out. "Just hand over the deed to your water rights and we can end this peaceful-like." Wade recognized the voice immediately. Thaddeus Jenkins, owner of the largest cattle operation in the county. He'd been trying to buy Wade's land for years, particularly since it contained the best access to Clear Creek, which ran year-round even during the driest summers. "Not happening, Jenkins," Wade shouted back. "This land belongs to my family." Another shot rang out, this one striking the metal rim of the water trough with a sharp ping. Emma whimpered against his chest. "Pa, I'm scared," she whispered, her small fingers clutching at his worn cotton shirt. "It's going to be all right," Wade promised, though he wasn't entirely sure how he would make good on those words. Since his wife Catherine had died of pneumonia 2 winters ago, it had been just him and Emma. The ranch was running on fumes, and while Wade could handle the livestock and repairs, keeping house and caring properly for a young girl while managing everything else was proving nearly impossible. The sound of hoofbeats signaled Jenkins' retreat, but Wade knew the man would be back. This was just the latest in a series of intimidation tactics. As the dust settled, Wade scooped Emma into his arms and carried her back to their modest 2-bedroom home. The interior was in disarray, dishes piled in the kitchen sink, laundry waiting to be washed, dust gathering on every surface. Wade simply hadn't had time to keep up with everything. That night, after tucking Emma into bed with promises that tomorrow would be better, Wade sat at his kitchen table by lamplight, head in his hands. Something had to change. He couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over his shoulder while watching his home fall apart around him. Emma deserved better. The next morning, Wade made a decision, after dropping Emma off with Mrs. Peterson, a kindly neighbor who watched her when Wade needed to go to town. He rode to Silver Creek with determination in his heart. The main street was bustling with the usual activity wagons loaded with goods, cowboys fresh off the trail looking for whiskey and women, merchants hawking their wares. Wade tied his horse outside the general store and stepped inside, nodding to Mr. Abernathy, the store's proprietor, who was helping another customer. "Be right with you, Wade," Abernathy called out. Wade waited patiently, his eyes drifting to the store's bulletin board where notices, wanted posters, and advertisements were pinned. One particular notice caught his attention: experienced housekeeper seeking position with respectable family. References available. Inquire at Marshall's office. Wade read the notice twice. A housekeeper was exactly what he needed, someone to help maintain the home, prepare meals, and perhaps even help with Emma while he focused on saving the ranch. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. After purchasing the supplies he needed, Wade made his way to Marshall Thompson's office at the end of the street. The gruff lawman looked up from his paperwork as Wade entered. "Morning, Hawkins. Jenkins giving you trouble again?" Wade nodded. "Nothing I can't handle." "Actually, I'm here about that notice in Abernathy's store. The housekeeper." Marshall Thompson's eyebrows rose. "Ah, yes, Miss Zadie Donovan. She arrived on the eastbound train 3 days ago, seems like a respectable young woman, said she was heading west for a fresh start. Is she still looking for work? Far as I know. She's staying at the boarding house. Mrs. Simmons has been letting her help with cooking to offset her room and board until she finds something permanent. Wade thanked the marshal and headed to the boarding house on the edge of town. Mrs. Simmons, a plump woman with graying hair and a perpetual smile, greeted him warmly. Miss Donovan. Oh, she's out back hanging laundry, hardest worker I've seen in years. You interested in hiring her, Wade? Thinking about it. With Emma growing up and the ranch to run, I could use the help. Mrs. Simmons nodded knowingly. It's been hard since Catherine passed. I'll fetch Miss Donovan for you. A few minutes later, Wade found himself face to face with Zadie Donovan. She wasn't what he had expected. Rather than the matronly, severe-looking woman he had imagined, Zadie was young, perhaps 25, with chestnut hair pulled back in a practical bun and clear green eyes that met his gaze directly. She wore a simple blue dress, modest but well-maintained, and carried herself with quiet dignity. Mr. Hawkins, she greeted him, her voice melodious with a slight Eastern accent. Mrs. Simmons says you're inquiring about my services as a housekeeper. Wade cleared his throat, suddenly feeling awkward. Yes, madam, I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. It's not much, but it's decent land. I have a daughter, Emma. She's 6. My wife passed 2 years ago and I've been managing alone, but… He trailed off, not wanting to reveal just how desperate his situation had become. Zadie's expression softened. I understand, Mr. Hawkins. I've worked for several families back east. I can cook, clean, mend clothing, and I'm good with children. I have references from my previous employers if you'd like to see them. Wade nodded, and she retrieved a small bundle of letters from her room. As he read through them, a picture emerged of a competent, hard-working young woman who had earned the respect and affection of her previous employers. These are impressive, Miss Donovan. If I may ask, what brings you all the way out to Colorado? A shadow crossed her face briefly. I was seeking a change of scenery, Mr. Hawkins. The East holds difficult memories for me now. Wade didn't press further. Everyone in the West had a past they'd rather not discuss. What mattered was the present and future. The position includes room and board, of course, plus $10 a month. It's not much, but it's fair, Zadie interrupted. And I would have my own room. Yes, madam, small but private. The house isn't grand, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room, but it's solid. There's running water from the well, and we've got a good stove for the winter months. Zadie considered his offer for a moment, then nodded. I accept, Mr. Hawkins. When would you like me to start? If you can be ready by tomorrow morning, I'll come by with the wagon to collect you and your belongings. They shook hands, and Wade felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he had hoped that things might improve for him and Emma. The next morning, Wade arrived at the boarding house as promised. Emma sat beside him on the wagon seat, swinging her legs excitedly. She had been thrilled at the prospect of having someone new at the ranch, especially another woman. You think she'll like me, Pa? Emma asked for the 3rd time that morning. Of course she will, sunshine. What's not to like? Zadie was waiting on the porch, a modest trunk containing her possessions at her feet. Mrs. Simmons stood beside her, handing her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Some cookies for the little one, Mrs. Simmons explained as Wade helped load Zadie's trunk into the wagon. And some of my sourdough starter for you, Zadie. Remember what I showed you about keeping it fed? Zadie thanked her warmly, then climbed onto the wagon with Wade's assistance. She settled next to Emma, smiling at the girl. Hello, Emma. I'm Miss Donovan, but you can call me Zadie if you'd like. Emma studied her with solemn blue eyes. You're pretty, she declared finally. Do you know any stories? Emma, Wade began, embarrassed by his daughter's forthrightness. It's quite all right, Zadie assured him. Then to Emma. I know many stories, and songs too. Would you like to hear one as we ride? Emma nodded eagerly, and as Wade guided the horses out of town, Zadie began a gentle folk song about a nightingale. Her voice was clear and sweet, rising and falling with the melody. Wade found himself entranced, nearly missing a turn in the road. By the time they reached the ranch, Emma had fallen asleep against Zadie's side, lulled by her singing and the rhythm of the wagon. Wade carried his daughter inside while Zadie surveyed her new home. The house showed signs of neglect, not filth, but the kind of gradual decline that happens when one person is stretched too thin. Dust had accumulated on the furniture, the curtains needed washing, and the floor hadn't seen a proper scrubbing in some time. "I'll show you to your room," Wade said after settling Emma on the sofa. "Then I can give you a tour of the place." Zadie's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the corral. Wade had cleared out the space the night before, moving his wife's remaining possessions to the attic. "It's perfect, Mr. Hawkins, thank you." "Wade," he corrected her. "If we're going to be living under the same roof, might as well use first names." Zadie nodded, a slight smile touching her lips. "Very well, Wade." Over the next few days, Zadie transformed the Hawkins household. She attacked the accumulated dust and grime with vigor, airing out rooms, washing curtains, and polishing the modest furniture until it gleamed. The kitchen became her domain, and soon the house was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, hearty stews, and apple pies. Wade found himself looking forward to returning to the house after long days working the ranch. For the first time since Catherine died, the place felt like a home again rather than just a shelter. But it was Zadie's relationship with Emma that truly cemented her place in their lives. The girl had been withdrawn since her mother's death, but she blossomed under Zadie's gentle attention. They gathered wildflowers together, Zadie teaching Emma their names and properties. They baked cookies, with Emma proudly presenting her father with her misshapen but lovingly made creations. And each night, Zadie would sing Emma to sleep with lullabies and folk songs, her voice floating through the small house like a blessing. One evening, about 2 weeks after Zadie's arrival, Wade returned from checking the fence line to find Emma and Zadie sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Emma was pointing out shapes in the clouds while Zadie nodded attentively. "Pa," Emma called when she spotted him. "Zadie says those pink clouds mean good weather tomorrow. Is that true?" Wade smiled as he dismounted. "That's what my pa always said, so it must be true." As he approached, he noticed how natural they looked together, as if Zadie had always been part of their lives. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he'd thought had died with Catherine. That night, after Emma was asleep, Wade found Zadie in the kitchen, preparing dough for the next morning's bread. "You've been a godsend," he said simply, leaning against the door frame. Zadie looked up, a dusting of flour on her cheek. "It's a pleasure to work for you and Emma. She's a wonderful child. She adores you." Wade hesitated, then added, "I've never seen her take to someone so quickly, not since her mother." A shadow crossed Zadie's face. "I'm not trying to replace Catherine, Wade. I would never presume I know that," he assured her quickly. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's good to see her happy again." Zadie nodded, her hands resuming their rhythmic kneading of the dough. "Children are resilient, but they need stability and love. And songs, apparently," Wade added with a small smile. "She talks about your singing all day." A blush colored Zadie's cheeks. "My mother sang to me every night. I find it helps children feel safe." Wade wanted to ask more about Zadie's past, about the difficult memories she'd mentioned, but he didn't want to pry. Everyone deserved their privacy. Instead, he said, "Would you like to join me on the porch for a while? Night's cool, but not too cold yet." Zadie looked surprised by the invitation, but after a moment, she nodded. "Let me just finish with this dough and wash up." They sat in comfortable silence on the porch swing, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, the occasional snort from the horses in the corral. "I never asked," Wade said after a while. "Can you ride?" Zadie laughed softly. "Not well, I'm afraid." "I grew up in Boston. Horses were for carriages, not riding." "I could teach you if you'd like. Might be useful out here." "I'd like that," she replied, and in the faint light from the window, Wade could see her smile. The weeks passed, and summer faded into fall. Zadie became an indispensable part of the Hawkins household, her presence bringing order and warmth to their lives. Wade found himself making excuses to be around the house more often, finishing his chores early or finding repairs that needed doing nearby. It wasn't just Emma who had grown attached to Zadie. Wade found himself watching her as she hung laundry, the breeze catching tendrils of hair that had escaped her practical bun. He noticed the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the graceful movement of her hands as she worked, the melodic sound of her laughter when Emma said something amusing. But with these growing feelings came guilt. Catherine had been gone only 2 years. Was it disloyal to feel this way about another woman? And even if it wasn't, what could he offer Zadie? A struggling ranch, a life of hard work, and a ready-made family. She deserved better. Zadie, for her part, maintained a professional distance, though Wade sometimes caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. There was something in her gaze that made his heart beat faster, but she always quickly looked away. One crisp October afternoon, Wade was repairing the chicken coop when he heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, he saw 3 riders approaching Thaddeus Jenkins and 2 of his hired men. Wade straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers as he moved to intercept them before they reached the house. He didn't want them anywhere near Emma or Zadie. "Jenkins," he greeted coolly as the men reined in their horses. "What brings you to my property?" Jenkins, a large man with a florid face partially hidden by a bushy beard, dismounted with surprising grace for his size. "Hawkins, just thought I'd stop by, see if you'd reconsidered my offer for your water rights." "Nothing's changed," Wade replied evenly. "This land stays in my family." Jenkins sighed dramatically. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. My herd is growing and I need reliable water access. I'm prepared to offer you a fair price, more than fair, considering your circumstances." His gaze drifted meaningfully toward the house. Wade felt his jaw tighten. "My circumstances are none of your concern, and my answer remains no." A darkness settled over Jenkins' features. "Things happen out here, Hawkins, accidents, fires. Would be a shame if something happened to that pretty little house of yours, or to that girl." Wade's hand dropped instinctively to his hip, where his revolver would normally be holstered, but he'd left it inside the house. Jenkins noticed the movement and smiled unpleasantly. "Just think about it," Jenkins said, remounting his horse. "My offer won't stay open forever." As the 3 men rode away, Wade stood watching until they disappeared over the hill. The threat had been clear, and for the first time he wondered if he was fighting a losing battle. Perhaps for Emma's sake, he should sell and move them somewhere safer. Lost in thought, he didn't hear Zadie approach until she spoke. "Who were those men?" Wade turned to find her standing a few feet away, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the autumn chill. "Thaddeus Jenkins and his hands," Wade replied. "He owns the big spread to the north. He's been trying to buy my water rights for years." Zadie studied his face. "And you're considering it now? Why?" Wade hesitated, not wanting to worry her. "It's nothing, just the usual pressure." "Wade Hawkins," Zadie said firmly. "I may be your employee, but I'd like to think I'm also your friend. Don't lie to me." The directness of her gaze broke down his resistance. "He threatened Emma," Wade admitted quietly. "Not directly, but the implication was clear enough." Zadie's eyes widened, then narrowed with determination. "Then we need to be prepared. What can I do to help?" Wade echoed, surprised by her response. "Yes, Zadie confirmed. "This is my home too, for now at least, and Emma," her voice softened. "I won't let anyone harm her." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition that they were no longer merely employer and employee, but allies, perhaps even friends. "Thank you," Wade said simply. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Wade and Zadie sat at the kitchen table, discussing what to do about Jenkins. Wade explained the situation more fully, how Jenkins had been systematically buying up all the smaller ranches in the area, sometimes through intimidation, and how Wade's land, with its year-round water access, was particularly valuable. Why not sell? Zadie asked, not as a suggestion but to understand his reasoning. You could start fresh somewhere else, somewhere safer for Emma. Wade's gaze drifted to the window where the silhouettes of the mountains were visible against the night sky. This land was my father's and his father's before him. They worked themselves to the bone to build something here, something that would last. He paused, collecting his thoughts. But more than that, Catherine is buried on that hill behind the house. I promised her I'd raise Emma here, where she could grow up knowing her mother was always near. Zadie reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Then we'll find a way to keep your promise. The warmth of her touch sent a current through Wade, and when their eyes met, he saw in hers the same confusion of feelings that had been troubling him: attraction, hesitation, possibility. Zadie withdrew her hand first, rising to make tea. Perhaps we should speak to Marshal Thompson, report Jenkins' threats. Wade shook his head. Jenkins practically owns the town council. Thompson is a good man, but his hands are tied without proof. They continued discussing options, but no clear solution presented itself. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them, and they retired to their respective rooms, the problem unresolved but somehow less overwhelming for having been shared. The next few weeks passed in heightened vigilance. Wade kept his rifle closer at hand, and he taught Zadie how to use the shotgun that hung above the kitchen door, just in case. Emma remained blissfully unaware of the tension, her days filled with lessons from Zadie and games in the crisp autumn air. October gave way to November, and the first snow dusted the mountains. Wade found himself watching the sky anxiously each evening, knowing that winter would bring its own challenges. The ranch was more isolated during the snowy months, which could be both a blessing and a curse if Jenkins decided to make good on his threats. One evening, as the first serious snowfall began, Wade returned from the barn to find the house unusually quiet. Emma, who normally greeted him exuberantly, was nowhere to be seen. Neither was Zadie. "Emma, Zadie," he called, a note of panic entering his voice as he moved through the house. The sound of muffled coughing led him to Emma's bedroom. There he found his daughter tucked into bed, her face flushed with fever, and Zadie sitting beside her, applying a cool cloth to the child's forehead. "She started feeling poorly after lunch," Zadie explained quietly. "The fever came on suddenly about an hour ago." Wade knelt beside the bed, his heart constricting at the sight of Emma's discomfort. "Hey, sunshine," he said softly. "Not feeling too good, huh?" Emma shook her head weakly. "My throat hurts, Pa, and I'm cold then hot." "Zadie's taking good care of you, isn't she?" Emma managed a small smile. "She sang me the Nightingale song, and she's making special tea." Wade looked questioningly at Zadie, who explained, "Willow bark tea, it helps reduce fever. My mother was a midwife. She taught me a few remedies." Throughout the night, they took turns sitting with Emma. Her fever rose and fell, never reaching dangerous levels but persistent enough to worry them both. During his shifts, Wade would tell Emma stories about her mother, about the ranch when he was a boy, about the adventures they would have when spring came. During Zadie's shifts, she sang, her clear voice a balm in the quiet house. Wade, trying to rest on the sofa but unable to sleep, listened to the melodies drifting from Emma's room and felt a profound gratitude for Zadie's presence in their lives. By morning, Emma's fever had broken. She was weak but hungry, a good sign. As Zadie prepared a light breakfast of oatmeal and applesauce, Wade pulled her aside. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion and lack of sleep. "If you hadn't been here." "But I was," Zadie said simply. "And I'm glad I could help." Wade impulsively reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Zadie's breath caught at the gesture, and for a moment they stood close enough that Wade could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. The moment was broken by Emma calling from her room. Zadie stepped back, a flush coloring her cheeks, and went to check on the child. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, exhausted from her illness, Wade found Zadie on the porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl despite the cold, watching the snow fall. "You should come inside," he said, joining her. "It's freezing out here." "It's beautiful," Zadie replied, her breath forming clouds in the frosty air. "We had snow in Boston, of course, but never like this, so vast and pristine." Wade stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body. "Thank you again for what you did for Emma." Zadie turned to face him. "Wade, you don't need to keep thanking me. Taking care of Emma is part of why I'm here." "Is that the only reason?" The words slipped out before Wade could stop them. Zadie's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" Wade took a deep breath. "I mean, is taking care of the house and Emma the only reason you've stayed? Even with Jenkins' threats, even with winter coming, even with all the hardships of ranch life." Zadie hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were twisting nervously in her shawl. "No," she admitted finally, "it's not the only reason." Wade gently lifted her chin with his finger, bringing her gaze back to his. "Then what is, she whispered. "You and Emma, you've become important to me." The admission hung between them, fragile as a snowflake. Wade's heart hammered in his chest as he slowly leaned forward, giving Zadie every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a tentative kiss, soft and questioning. When they parted, Zadie's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if savoring the feeling. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Wade confessed. Zadie's eyes opened, a mixture of joy and uncertainty in their depths. "Wade, there are things about me, about my past, that you don't know." "Then tell me," he said simply. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." Zadie took a deep breath. "I was engaged, back in Boston, to a man named Frederick Winthrop. He was from a wealthy family, and the match was considered quite advantageous for someone of my modest background." Wade listened silently, giving her the space to tell her story. "As the wedding approached, I began to see a different side of him. He was controlling, possessive. He would fly into rages over small things if I spoke to another man at a social gathering, or if dinner wasn't prepared exactly as he liked." Zadie's voice grew quieter. "The first time he hit me, he apologized profusely afterward, said it would never happen again. I believed him." Wade's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "It did happen again, of course, and again. Each time with more elaborate apologies, more promises. My parents had both passed by then, and I had no one to turn to. His family was influential, and I knew no one would believe me over him." "How did you get away?" Wade asked gently. His sister, Margaret. She'd suspected what was happening and confronted me one day when she saw the bruises. "She helped me plan my escape, gave me money for a train ticket west and the names of people who might help me find work. I left in the middle of the night, 2 weeks before the wedding." Zadie's eyes held a hint of defiance now. "I don't regret leaving, but I live in fear that he'll find me." "He swore he would." Wade took her hands in his. "Zadie, listen to me. If this Frederick ever shows his face around here, he'll have to go through me first, and I promise you that won't be easy." Tears welled in Zadie's eyes. "You don't think less of me for running away, for bringing this potential danger to your door." "Less of you." Wade shook his head in disbelief. "Zadie, you're the strongest person I know. You had the courage to leave, to start over, to build a new life. How could I possibly think less of you for that?" He pulled her into his arms, and she rested her head against his chest, her tears dampening his shirt. They stood that way for a long time, the snow falling silently around them, cocooning them in a world of white. In the weeks that followed, Wade and Zadie's relationship deepened. They moved cautiously, both aware of Emma's watchful eyes and the complexities of their situation. Their moments together were stolen: a touch of hands while passing dishes at dinner, a brief kiss in the barn while Emma napped, quiet conversations by the fire after Emma was asleep. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite the ever-present concern about Jenkins. Zadie threw herself into preparations, decorating the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, baking cookies and fruitcake, and helping Emma create handmade gifts for her father. Wade, for his part, made secret trips to town, returning with packages hidden under his coat that he stashed in the attic until Christmas Eve. On December 23rd, a fierce blizzard descended on the ranch, the wind howling around the eaves of the house like a living thing. Wade hurried to secure the animals in the barn, bringing the chickens into an enclosed pen inside the larger structure to protect them from the bitter cold. As he worked, a movement at the edge of his vision caught his attention. Through the swirling snow, he could make out the silhouettes of riders approaching the ranch. His first thought was of Jenkins, choosing the storm as cover for whatever he had planned. Wade grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the barn wall and positioned himself behind a stack of hay bales, watching as 3 riders emerged from the white curtain of snow. To his surprise, it wasn't Jenkins, but Marshal Thompson and 2 deputies. "Thompson." Wade called out, lowering his rifle as he recognized the lawman. "What brings you out in this weather?" The marshal dismounted, his face grim. "Bad news, I'm afraid. Jenkins was found dead in his office this morning, shot through the heart." Wade's stomach dropped. "And you think I did it?" "No," Thompson said quickly. "You've got a solid alibi. Old Jeremiah from the feed store saw you in town yesterday morning when the shooting happened. But," he hesitated, "there's a witness who says they saw Miss Donovan leaving Jenkins' ranch house around the time of the murder." Wade felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "That's impossible. Zadie was here with Emma." Thompson shook his head. "The witness is Jenkins' housekeeper. She identified Miss Donovan from a description. Said a young woman with chestnut hair and green eyes came to see Jenkins," they argued, "and then she heard a shot." "It wasn't Zadie," Wade insisted. "She never left the ranch yesterday." "I believe you," Thompson said, "but I need to talk to her, get her side of things." "This is official business, Wade." Wade led the marshal and his deputies to the house, his mind racing. Who would want to frame Zadie for Jenkins' murder? And why, inside, they found Zadie and Emma by the fire, working on a patchwork quilt. Zadie looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw the grim expressions on the men's faces. "Emma, why don't you go to your room for a bit?" Wade suggested. "The adults need to talk." Once Emma was out of earshot, Thompson explained the situation. Zadie listened with growing horror, her face draining of color. "I never left the ranch," she protested. "I was here with Emma all day. We baked bread and worked on the quilt. Wade, tell him." "I wasn't here all day," Wade admitted reluctantly. "I left for town early and didn't get back until mid-afternoon." Thompson looked between them. "Is there anyone who can vouch for your whereabouts during the morning hours, Miss Donovan?" Zadie's mind raced. "Mrs. Peterson. She stopped by around 10 to drop off some yarn for our quilt." "She stayed for tea," Thompson nodded. "I'll check with her, but in the meantime, I'm afraid I need to take you into town for questioning." "In this blizzard," Wade protested. "Thompson, be reasonable. She's not going anywhere. I'll vouch for her." The marshal hesitated, then relented. "All right. But I'll be back as soon as the weather clears, and I expect both of you to be here." After Thompson and his deputies left, Zadie collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking. "Wade, I didn't do this. You have to believe me." Wade knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Of course I believe you. We'll figure this out." Emma appeared in the doorway, her small face concerned. "Is Zadie in trouble, Pa?" Wade and Zadie exchanged glances. "No, sunshine," Wade assured her. "There's just been a misunderstanding. Everything's going to be fine." That night, after Emma was asleep, Wade and Zadie sat at the kitchen table trying to make sense of the situation. "Who would want to frame you for Jenkins' murder?" Wade wondered aloud. Zadie shook her head helplessly. "I don't know. I've barely met anyone in town, let alone made enemies." A terrible thought occurred to Wade. "Unless, Zadie, could Frederick have found you? Could he be trying to punish you?" Zadie's eyes widened. "Frederick? But how would he know about Jenkins, or that framing me for his murder would cause such trouble? Maybe he's been watching, learning about our situation. Jenkins wasn't exactly subtle about his interest in my land." The possibility hung in the air between them, growing more plausible the more they considered it. If Frederick had followed Zadie to Colorado, he could have seen her new life, her growing relationship with Wade, and decided to destroy it out of spite. If it is Frederick, Zadie said slowly. Then he won't stop with this. He'll find other ways to hurt us. Wade reached across the table and took her hand. Then we'll be ready for him. The blizzard raged for 2 more days, keeping them isolated at the ranch. On the morning of the 3rd day, Christmas Eve, the storm finally broke, leaving behind a pristine landscape of sparkling white. Wade went out early to check on the animals and clear paths between the house, barn, and well. As he worked, he kept a watchful eye on the road, expecting Thompson to appear as soon as the way was passable. But the day wore on with no sign of the marshal or his deputies. Inside the house, Zadie and Emma were putting the finishing touches on their Christmas preparations. Despite the cloud hanging over them, they were determined to make the holiday special, particularly for Emma's sake. As dusk approached, Wade began to relax slightly. Perhaps Thompson had been delayed by other matters, or the roads were still too difficult to traverse. They might have this night, at least, before facing whatever came next. After dinner, they gathered in the sitting room. Emma, vibrating with excitement, could barely sit still as Wade read The Night Before Christmas from a worn book that had belonged to his own father. Zadie sat beside her on the sofa, her arm around the girl's shoulders, occasionally meeting Wade's eyes over Emma's head with a look that spoke volumes about her affection for both of them. When the story was finished, Emma insisted it was time for presents, despite the traditional opening on Christmas morning. "Just one each," she pleaded. "Please, Pa." Wade glanced at Zadie, who nodded with a smile. "All right, sunshine, one each tonight, the rest tomorrow." Emma clapped her hands delightedly and ran to retrieve the packages hidden beneath the small pine tree they had decorated. She presented a lumpy, newspaper-wrapped bundle to Wade and a smaller, neater package to Zadie. "Open mine first," she insisted. Wade carefully unwrapped his gift to find a hand-knitted scarf in varying shades of blue, the stitches uneven but clearly made with great care. "Zadie helped me," Emma explained. "But I did most of it myself. Do you like it, Pa?" Wade wrapped the scarf around his neck immediately. "It's perfect, sunshine, the best gift I've ever received." Zadie opened her gift next to a small hand-painted wooden box. "Emma chose the design," Wade explained. "I just did the carving and construction." Zadie ran her fingers over the delicate wildflowers painted on the lid. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you both." Emma looked expectantly at Wade. "Now you give Zadie her present, Pa." Wade cleared his throat nervously. "Actually, I have something for both of you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew 2 small packages. The first, which he handed to Emma, contained a silver locket with a tiny photograph of Catherine inside. "So you can always keep your mother close to your heart," he explained as Emma examined the necklace with wonder. Then he turned to Zadie, holding out the second package. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped it to reveal a small wooden ring, intricately carved with a pattern of intertwining vines. "I made it from the same piece of oak as your box," Wade said softly. "I know it's not gold or silver, but it's perfect," Zadie interrupted, her eyes shining with tears. Wade took her hand. "Zadie Donovan, I know we haven't known each other long, and I know there are challenges ahead, but these past months with you have shown me that life can be full of joy again. Emma adores you and I." He paused, gathering his courage. "I love you. Will you stay with us, not as our housekeeper, but as my wife, as part of our family?" Tears spilled down Zadie's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Emma, who had been watching with wide eyes, let out a squeal of delight and threw her arms around both of them. "Does this mean Zadie will be my new mother, and she'll never leave?" Wade looked at Zadie, whose face shone with happiness despite her tears. "That's right, sunshine. Zadie's going to stay with us forever." "Good," Emma declared firmly. "Because she sings me to sleep, Pa. I didn't want you to let her go." The 3 of them laughed together, a family already in all the ways that mattered most. The sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Wade went to the window and saw Marshal Thompson riding up, accompanied by his deputies, and another man he didn't recognize, tall, expensively dressed, with a rigid posture that spoke of eastern cities rather than the western frontier. "Stay here," Wade told Zadie and Emma, grabbing his rifle before stepping onto the porch to meet the visitors. "Thompson," he greeted the marshal cautiously. "Who's your friend?" The well-dressed stranger stepped forward. "Frederick Winthrop," he introduced himself with a clipped Boston accent. "I'm looking for my fiancée, Zadie Donovan." Wade's grip tightened on his rifle. "There's no one here by that name." "Don't play games with me, sir," Frederick said coldly. "I know she's here, and I know she's wanted for questioning in a murder." "That's being cleared up as we speak," Thompson interjected. "Jenkins' housekeeper admitted this morning that she was paid to lie about seeing a woman matching Miss Donovan's description. Seems Jenkins had plenty of enemies, and one of them wanted to create a convenient scapegoat." Relief flooded through Wade, followed quickly by renewed tension as he registered Frederick's determined expression. "That's irrelevant to my purpose," Frederick said dismissively. "I've come to take Zadie home where she belongs." "She is home," Wade replied firmly. "And she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." The door opened behind him and Zadie stepped onto the porch, her chin held high despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Hello, Frederick." Frederick's face twisted with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through? The embarrassment. The scandal. You'll come home with me now and we'll put this unfortunate episode behind us." "No," Zadie said simply. "I won't." Frederick took a step toward her, but Wade moved to block his path. The lady said no. Frederick's hand moved toward his coat pocket. "Stand aside." "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Wade countered. "You see, Zadie has just agreed to become my wife." Frederick's face contorted with rage. "You little whore," he spat at Zadie. "You think you can humiliate me like this, that I'll let you choose this frontier savage over me?" In one fluid motion, Frederick withdrew a small pistol from his pocket and aimed it at Wade. Before he could fire, Thompson's deputies had their weapons trained on him. "Put it down, Mr. Winthrop," Thompson ordered calmly. "There's no need for bloodshed." For a moment it seemed Frederick might disregard the warning, his finger tightening on the trigger as he glared at Wade. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. "This isn't over," he promised, his voice cold with hatred. "She belongs to me." "No, Frederick," Zadie said, stepping forward to stand beside Wade. "I belong to myself, and I choose to share my life with Wade and Emma, not out of fear or obligation but out of love." Frederick's expression hardened. "Love? What do you know of love? You're nothing but a midwife's daughter, lucky enough to catch the eye of a Winthrop. You should be grateful I still want you after your disgraceful behavior." "I am grateful," Zadie replied calmly. "Grateful that I found the courage to leave. Grateful that I found people who value me for who I am, not for what I can bring them. And most of all, grateful that I now know the difference between possession and love." Her words seemed to deflate Frederick, the malice in his eyes giving way to something closer to bewilderment. He had clearly never expected Zadie to stand up to him, to choose her own path. "She's made her choice," Thompson said firmly. "I suggest you respect it and return to Boston, Mr. Winthrop." Frederick looked from Zadie to Wade, then to the armed deputies. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Very well. But don't think this ends here. The Winthrop family has a long memory and longer reach." With that, he remounted his horse and rode away without a backward glance. Thompson turned to Wade and Zadie. "I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your door, especially on Christmas Eve, but when Mr. Winthrop arrived in town asking after Miss Donovan, I thought it best to accompany him, given the circumstances." "You did the right thing," Wade assured him. "And thank you for clearing Zadie's name in Jenkins' death." Thompson nodded. "As for Jenkins, it seems one of his former hands had a grudge. We found the murder weapon in his possession and he's confessed." He tipped his hat. "I'll leave you folks to your Christmas now." After Thompson and his deputies had departed, Wade, Zadie, and Emma returned to the warmth of the sitting room. Emma, who had watched the confrontation from the window, had questions. "Was that a bad man, Zadie?" she asked, climbing onto Zadie's lap. Zadie smoothed Emma's hair gently. He's a man who doesn't understand that people aren't possessions. That love means wanting someone to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you. Is he going to come back? Emma's voice held a trace of worry. Wade and Zadie exchanged glances over Emma's head. I don't think so, Sunshine, Wade said. But if he does, we'll face him together. That's what families do. Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. And we're a family now, right? You, me, and Zadie. That's right, Wade confirmed, his heart full as he looked at the two people who had brought joy back into his life. We're a family. Later that night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, her new locket clutched in her hand, Wade and Zadie stood on the porch, watching the stars twinkling in the clear winter sky. Are you really not afraid he'll come back? Zadie asked softly. Wade pulled her closer, his arm around her waist. I'm not saying it's impossible, but Frederick strikes me as a man who values his pride above all else. Going back to Boston and pretending you never existed would be easier for him than admitting he couldn't force you to return. Zadie rested her head against his shoulder. I hope you're right. Besides, Wade added with a smile, we're survivors, you and I. We've both faced loss and come through it. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Zadie turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face gently. I love you, Wade Hawkins, for your strength, your kindness, and your heart. And I love you, Zadie Donovan, for your courage, your spirit, and your songs. As they sealed their promise with a kiss, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white, a new beginning for a family forged not by blood, but by choice and love. In the years that followed, the Hawkins ranch prospered. Wade used Jenkins' death to negotiate fair water rights with the new owner of the larger spread, ensuring both properties could thrive. Zadie became known throughout the region for her healing skills, the knowledge passed down from her mother finding new purpose in the frontier community. Emma grew into a confident young woman with her father's determination and Zadie's compassion. And eventually, she was joined by two younger brothers who never tired of hearing the story of how their mother had come to the ranch as a housekeeper and stayed to build a life filled with love, music, and the quiet strength of a family that had chosen each other. Frederick Winthrop never returned to Colorado, though occasionally letters arrived from Boston bearing news of his eventual marriage to a banking heiress and his rising political career. Zadie read these missives with a detached interest, grateful for the life she had escaped and the one she had built in its place. On summer evenings, when the work was done and the children were settled, Wade and Zadie would often sit on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. And sometimes, Zadie would sing, her voice carrying across the land that had become truly home a melody of love that had begun with a frightened young woman seeking refuge and a lonely cowboy who had simply wanted someone to care for his daughter.